Good afternoon. Now, some people are taking antidotes to all the high living that they might have done last night and mixing Bloody Marys and whatnot. We give you an antidote to Lawrence Welk. Some of the finest music anywhere today.
Liquid, smooth, professional, eloquent, exquisite. It is the music, you know, modern jazz music, that has raised an entire generation and provides the comfort and the sustenance when all the world seems to be going wrong.
Jazz is not something I grew up with, you know. It was rock and roll and whatnot, and I've heard a lot about jazz dying, reviving, dying, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. Are we in, I don't even want to talk about whether we're in a revival now, but I am in a revival, if you like. I'm learning jazz.
I guess as a reaction against the acid rock and all the raucousness of rock music, there's a return in a lot of forms, a lot of media, films and all sorts of things, to beauty, to classical sorts of things. And Paul Desmond represents probably as vividly as anyone that exquisite expression of what you feel, musicians feel, that developed in the 1950s and mostly on the west coast of the United States, so-called west coast cool jazz.
And he's playing now with largely west coast Canadian band. Paul Desmond was with the Brubeck Quartet, Dave Brubeck, and he went into sort of semi-retirement about 7 years ago. And he came out to come up to play in Canada with a guitarist by the name of Ed Bickert. They cut a beautiful, beautiful album called Pure Desmond.
So nice that you can't buy it. It's practically a collector's item. Very hard to find.
And they're playing again, or they have been recently. And they're going to play again together.
And recorded again. Well, we've collected Paul Desmond and the band that is backing him, Ed Bickert from Vernon, BC on guitar, Don Thompson from Powell River on bass, Jerry Fuller on drums. Jerry's from Vancouver. We'll chat, we'll hear some music, relax, and let it all hang out, as they say.
Over to you, Chet.
Well, Desmond, that sounds just beautiful, even though we all know how it's going to sound when it comes out of our television sets. How much practice and rehearsal do people do before you go into a club date?
Hardly any, as it turned out. This is a very sort of brave move on my part in terms of my sheltered life with the Brubeck Quartet all those years. I first came up here because I heard about Ed Bickert through Jim Hall. Ed Bickert, the guitar player, who was incredible, and Don Thompson, the bass player, also, and Jerry Fuller. So I came up here, and without any rehearsal at all, we started playing the first trip. This is my third now.
You just arrived. Yeah, you've been in a sort of retirement, or semi-retirement, since the Brubeck Quartet broke up.
Yeah.
You have. I've been reading Gene Leaves. What made you come back, or more importantly, what made you go into retirement in the first place?
Fatigue. Grouchiness, a number of things. It sort of hit the whole group about the same time. We'd been traveling for roughly 17 years. In the last 10 years, about 300 concerts a year, and it got to be too much.
What did you do then?
I just sat around for a while and did nothing, and then gradually Dave got into writing his symphonic works, and I started working on a book, and Gene Wright went out to the coast, Joe Morello does drum clinics, and we started to miss playing, so I began recording on my own. I worked some with Jim Hall, and then I started coming up here. This is the only club I've played in probably about 25 years, just so I can play with these guys.
Your last album, which is beautiful, I must say that the distributors aren't off the mark too much because the records aren't available anywhere.
Yeah.
But you've got another one coming out.
Yeah, it's either coming out or, depending on when this is, it will have been out shortly ago. But in the club, we're recording live this trip, and I'm sure we'll get an album out of it.
You're very nervous right now. Why? Is it me? You're so calm when you're playing. Or are you calm? Is that just a facade?
That's total huge fraud, is the honest truth.
You look absolutely composed, and you coax this. I know nothing about jazz. Does that distress you?
Not a
that
bit.
I should be sitting here talking to you?
No, I'm delighted.
From what I do know, the people that do know and the people that I listen to tell me that you have the sweetest sounding saxophone in the entire world. And it just seems to come out very gently. Your sound is not frenetic or wild. It's hard to believe that you ever stopped playing it.
I lucked out in many ways because I really don't deserve it to have stuck with me. I really didn't play for about 3 years at all before I went back to recording. And in some ways, it may have helped.
Gene Lees on your last album cover wrote that that you and Ed Bickert had met up and that you came up here and you started playing with him. You played with him today. And he mentioned that you were so quiet and shy, and Ed Bickert was so abominably shy. He didn't know how you'd ever got together or could say anything to each other in the first place.
Took a couple of weeks
before you said anything.
Exchanged too many sentences, yeah. But
you wanted to be a writer at one time, did you?
Yeah.
You still want to be a writer when you grow up?
Not all that much, actually, if I ever indeed do. One thing I learned during the years of not playing, I started hanging out in a bar in New York called the Lanes, where a lot of heavyweight writers spend a lot of time. And I discovered over a year or so that almost all of them have secret Walter Mitty dreams of becoming jazz players.
Of course.
And I figured that's a dumb move to turn in a fairly secure place in the world of jazz for number 493 unemployed humorist.
When you did retire, or almost retire at one point, that you were able to because of a great financial setup that you and Dave Brubeck had got into. Has that security left you now? Do you have to play?
Well, not really, but it isn't quite as secure as it once looked. There's a sort of yearly income. We sort of squirreled away the receipts from all the concerts and everything into a fund and took it out at so much a year. And there's some that really look terrific in 1954, does not look all that sensational these days. And the whole thing ends, appropriately enough, in 1984. So if I'm still around for that, I'll have to go back to work anyway.
Who would you like to play with now? Who are the
My
your
favorite guys are
favorite
the ones you
Okay.
either just listen to or are just about to listen to.
Apart from
Apart from Ed and
apart from
Don.
those people, who are the other people that you like and admire in the jazz scene right now?
Well, Jim Hall, I've always liked playing with him. I've made a bunch of records with him. Jerry Mulligan, likewise. And most of my time, of course, I spent with old Father David Brubeck. There's an album, I'm sure, which is out by now with just the two of us, just duets. And as a matter of fact, they're talking about reassembling the original quartet with Joe Morello and Gene Wright.
That tune was called Take Five. It was the signature, I guess, of the Brubeck Quartet when Paul and he played, Paul Desmond. And it was the first of the out-of-time type of arrangements, you know, where the time isn't strictly 4/4 or 2/4 or whatever.
Right.
5/4, I think.
They don't do it badly, do they?
Oh.
I love him. I just love him. He's so gentle.
Do you know how good that music is?
Well, I like it.
I hate to sound sort of fatuous like that, but that is as good of that form as you're ever going to hear in the world.
It really is beautiful.
Magnificent.
The tragedy of it is that when they play in the club,
Yeah.
which is Bourbon Street in Toronto, and full credit to them for bringing in the players they do. It's a supper club, you know, and there's all this chatter and rattle and yelling orders and whatnot. Desmond, I remember, once said that he felt very strongly about people sitting down in front of him and ordering a full bottle. But he didn't mind drinking so much. He didn't like the eating and whatnot. This was many years ago, in the 1950s, and the chatter. But he didn't mind someone with a full bottle of bourbon, although we all knew what kind of people those were too that sat down at the table. But it's a difficult situation because they play so softly you can hardly hear it.
It's always been the bane of almost any jazz musician I've ever heard, that they always have to play in clubs of some kind where liquor is served so that they can make money.
Well, the booze could, but the liquor being served isn't so bad. Isn't as bad as the dinners being served.
So, when liquor is served, people get a little bit high, you know, and the higher you get, the louder they get, and the more it interferes with any jazz.
This is your era, Paul Stoles. I was reading an article about, it's printed in 1954, Time magazine, 1954, and it was about Brubeck, and there's a little glossary here of the terms.
Of the terms, jazz terminology.
Of the new jazz terms, and the new terms included ball, for having a good time. That's having a ball. And cool, relax, I cooled it at a table for a while. Cat, that's a jazz musician. Combo.
Yeah, man, that was a hip era, you know, funky and groovy. I can dig it.
You can dig it, right?
Sure.
Dig?
And all these words now have become part of the language.
Well, they've almost, I suppose they have.
No, using the word hip, that's, you know, I'm hip, or...
Hipster, one who is hip.
Well, that's
hip was an adjective.
Hipster is now hep.
Well, no, hipster is a person.
I know, but hep is very unhip. Very low.
It is,
brow,
yeah.
Very no good at all.
And things aren't supposed to be hot anymore. They should be cool.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
A rich era. Jazz is, as you can tell, I guess, a language of its own. That's why those writers wanted to be jazz musicians.
I got to tell you another...
It's the most magnificent self-expression, personal expression.
I got to tell you another
you
story
can
about
reach.
Desmond. He looks so quiet, you know. Windy, one of the songs we heard was named for a girl, and he said, I don't know whether I'll have to change it or not, because what'll happen when Sylvie, Barbara, Janet, and Joan find out?
You get his albums, they've got names like that on all the other cuts if you can. A nice way to start the year, the visit with Paul Desmond.
Our New Year's present to you.
And a great Canadian group with him.